So I'm Sean Picorni. I'd like to welcome everybody to Research Conference today. We're very fortunate to be joined by John Rumsfeld today, who's currently the Chief Innovation Officer for the American College of Cardiology. He's also former Director of Cardiology for the VA health system prior to this job, and he was on full-time faculty at University of Colorado as well while he was overseeing the cardiology practices at the VA. So he's responsible for developing the long-term innovation agenda to help the ACC maintain its competitive advantage in the global marketplace, investigating global and domestic market trends in the delivery of cardiovascular care and health information technology, and exploring new technologies in a team-based approach to healthcare. And so we were just talking a little bit about the excitement of his job, and he's, in addition to this, extraordinarily well-published and an expert on big data. And so we're really excited to have him with us here today.
Okay. All right, very kind. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, it's always that awkward ocean between me and you. So really a thrill for me to be here. The last time I was here visiting Duke as a visiting professor, Adrienne Hernandez was a fellow. So it's been a little bit of time, but I've had lifelong friends and colleagues here. And so I'm talking about something today which I think might be different for a research conference. So, but what I'm really hoping is that it's the start of a conversation. I know I've already started with a lot of the fellows, but I'm hoping others of you, please, I'm asking you, if any of this sounds like a new frontier where we need to go in research and collaboration, in this case between ACC and Duke, I would love to follow up with you. It's as much of a conversation started as anything. So I'm going to talk about the digital transformation of healthcare, more specifically a lot of the challenges therein, but I'm hoping to end with somewhat of a roadmap or a way forward. So let me start in the most obvious place, which is here, which is headlines, okay, the hype that we're seeing around digital care. This is not fake, this is totally real, which is the Tricorder X Prize offered $10 million to build a Star Trek-inspired health scanner. This is what's happening in Silicon Valley. This is what they're going after with a lot of money, where they wanted to have a scanner to diagnose all these diseases, and it was inspired by the television show Star Trek. We also see a lot of headlines like this, right? So artificial intelligence, or AI, which is the most common and hyped term right now in Silicon Valley and in the tech world globally, predicts heart attacks better than doctors. All right? So apparently they're way ahead of us, and we're doing this. Now, why is all this happening? All right? It's all happening because of what's happened in the last 60 years with computers and computer power. So a little over 60 years ago, in 1956, this is what it took to ship a 5 megabyte hard drive. This phone has 256 gigabytes, okay? That's where we've come in those 60 plus years. And this is being driven by an exponential growth in computing power, which continues unabated. Some people wondered if so-called Moore's law of the doubling of computer power every 18 months would go away, but it's very unlikely to go away, and the exponential growth is likely to continue because of the advent of so-called quantum computing, which is now no longer theoretic, but both the Chinese, the Americans, and others have actually are moving it forward very rapidly. So we're going to see this continue to grow. The most obvious manifestation of this is in everything else we do, right? All the other sectors of our world, the financial sector, the entertainment sector, the transportation sectors of our economy have undergone a so-called digital transformation, which makes things more efficient, makes it easier to access, gives us new power we never had before in a more rapid way. And so you have to ask yourselves, if we've had this computing power and we have all this technology and it's disrupted all those sectors, how are we doing in healthcare? Well, at least in healthcare in delivery of healthcare, we haven't seen anything change. Or as Harlan Krumholtz likes to say, we're still practicing in a Department of Motor Vehicles model. of healthcare delivery. Now, are we high tech in healthcare and in cardiovascular disease in particular? Darn right we are. New drug, new defibrillator, new stent. We immediately adopt them in practice. But what I'm talking about here is not high tech medical care. I'm talking about healthcare delivery, where you can't tell when, except for that it's not in black and white, you can't tell when this was taken. And there may be, and by the way, you can't tell if this is a DMV or an emergency room. And you also can't tell if there's computers behind those desks, which might be true, but many people would say the first step in the digital transformation of healthcare was the EHR, which is a misstep, right? I mean, has that really made us more efficient and better? Probably not, even if it's digital. We also have this problem, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I get tired of it, as I'm sure all of you do, and that is hearing how expensive and ineffective our healthcare system is. But it is a persistent drumbeat, and it doesn't mean it's not going to force change. Something has to happen to change the fact that from a value perspective, we're not getting what we put into the system. And it's not that we don't provide excellent care to our patients and excellent medical care. It is the delivery system that's the problem. And just to keep it a little lighter, we rank 169th in the world in health outcomes between Croatia and Guam. And they're not spending 18% of their gross domestic product. I think this is actually compelling. We're in trouble when Warren Buffett refers to the US healthcare system as a tapeworm for the economy. Okay? Now that's both funny, but it's also not funny. If Warren Buffett feels that our US healthcare delivery system is actually a threat to us as an economy and as a leading nation in the world. In other words, healthcare could take us down as an economic powerhouse. Something is going to change. It has to change. And heart disease is right at the top. Okay, we're right at the top of the cost. We're right at the top of mostly aging population, but also increase in risk factors, obesity epidemic worldwide, of course, and so forth, driving an increase in heart disease both as a disease and in cost, and then all this variation and stuff we have to deal with. So I think there's a compelling need for the digital transformation of healthcare. Now, what is digital transformation? A couple things. First of all, the DX on the screen is not diagnosis. I know we're all a lot of clinical background here. This is the big D, big DX that Silicon Valley refers to. They call it digital transformation. And what the most obvious example, although it's a narrow example, is the smartphone, right? Where the idea is that the best technology is silent technology that makes something easier. That is, something comes in and replaces all these other functions you were supposed to use. That's the ideal of digital transformation. We just have not yet seen it in our healthcare delivery system. Now, here's the next paradox. Silicon Valley thinks it's already happened, okay? Now, when I go to clinic on Thursday, when I go back today, and I go to clinic on Thursday at the VA, I'm pretty much seeing patients exactly the way I did for the last 20 plus years. But boy, you wouldn't know it from the headlines that come out of Silicon Valley. A digital revolution in healthcare is speeding up. Telemedicine, predictive diagnostics, wearable sensors, and new apps will transform and manage health, while data analytics, remote care, and interconnectivity are prepared to transform medical care. I still believe all that to be true. And these are headlines from 2017. The only problem is I can find almost the exact same headlines from 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, et cetera. It really hasn't changed all the promise and excitement. But what has changed is that the money going into it is mind-boggling, okay? Over $7 billion, with a B, $7 billion went into digital healthcare startup companies in 2017 alone. $7 billion, startup companies only, and that doesn't even touch, and this is this is the manifest of that. What has that $7 billion bought us? It has bought us all these companies. And by the way, behind each of these groupings are dozens and dozens and dozens of other companies, and the second you make this slide, it's out of date because they're being acquired, they're folding, they're failing, they're whatever, okay? So there is just a massive hype of tons of companies trying to sell you everything from artificial intelligence analytics to digital health to everything else. It's absolutely overwhelming, and like I said, I still doesn't really change how I practice healthcare on Thursdays at the VA. But I have buried the lead a little bit. I mentioned them earlier. Some of those startups will succeed, potentially. Not one digital health startup, however, has made it to initial public offering. So it hasn't succeeded yet. But what is happening is they get acquired by these people. And these are likely to be the drivers in the digital transformation of healthcare, and begs the question of what our role is. They acquire those companies. By the way, just as an aside, why do they acquire those companies? Not necessarily for their technology. They acquire them for the people. They're trying to get the data scientists and the smartest people inside, and then they're trying to drive this forward. The other thing that's kind of, I think, gets missed a lot is what's happening in the companies we in healthcare know very well. And these are just meant to be examples, so if any of you, I can add other logos to the slide if anybody wants. Don't overlook the fact that the companies we've known and worked with forever, especially in the medical device space and so forth, are skating as fast as possible towards this AI stuff and the digital health stuff, okay? Have you noticed they've started stopping referring to their stuff as products and increasingly use the words solutions and platforms? When you hear solution or platform, you know they are tying it to a digital health platform or they're using artificial intelligence, all right? They're going all in on this, and the FDA has said, and we've talked to them directly, they're already wondering what they're going to do. All the next generation of medical devices that we implant are going to have AI embedded in them. To do what? To predict what? And what are we supposed to do with that information? And the FDA is saying, how are we supposed to evaluate that? So if you think this isn't happening, and it's happening fast. And where do we position ourselves? This is causing a lot of discomfort. Okay, we're seeing a lot of stuff like this, the rise of artificial intelligence and the uncertain future for physicians. And I don't think it's just physicians, it's clinicians in general. And then, of course, you have some people like Vinod Khosla, who runs the largest, billionaire, who runs venture capital in healthcare, who is basically saying, do we need doctors or algorithms? I think maybe AI will just replace clinicians altogether. Potentially researchers too, by the way. I come back to that because, we'll just have this. And it actually gets so far out there, it's actually hard to tell what is, like so many things in our world these days, real and fake news, that actually when I saw this headline, which isn't real, I actually paused and thought, wait a minute. Amazon warehouses is stocked with 20,000 doctors in preparation for healthcare launch. Also amusing, but also speaks to this point of, if we don't take a leadership position and know what we're trying to do in this whole thing, we may become commoditized in this. There's a pretty high chance we could become commoditized if it just happens to, if it's just done to us like the electronic health record was just done to us. So we have one huge thing in our advantage here, and that is this, that despite all those companies and all that money and all that enthusiasm, the digital transformation of healthcare delivery hasn't happened. And one of the big reasons why is right here, is that the hype is crazy what they promise. The actual delivery or evidence that these things can improve how we deliver care, much less improve the outcomes of our patients and do so in a way that creates value and efficiency, almost purely lacking. And so when we go back to Silicon Valley and all these companies, if I've learned nothing else in the last 2.5 years, is there's an awful lot of technology in search of a problem. And they're very overt about it. We have this amazing tech, and you say, well, what does it do, or what does it do? They're like, well, no, that's for the doctors or the nurses to figure out what it's supposed to do. They are technology solutions in search of a problem. That's not going to work. The second thing is that evidence, I already said this about the hype and evidence, there just isn't much evidence about health technology or how to evaluate these to show they do what they do. And the second part of it, I just want to say, and can be an enemy. You can't underestimate that most of these companies have venture capital backing when they only have a little bit of time to develop a technology and get it to market. A vast majority of them have little to zero interest in actually studying the impact of their technology on patients or healthcare, because what they're really hoping is to get attention and get acquired. They're looking for an exit, a financial exit, okay? And they're under pressure from VC funding. So you have to understand that a lot of these are not going to be interested even in the kind of evaluation we want. And then last but most important, clinical insights and integration are largely absent. I'm picking on Silicon Valley, but it's really true for tech around the world. They just fundamentally don't understand how we care for patients, how we interact with patients, what our goal, even as care evolves maybe away from hospital and clinic-based and longitudinal care and so forth, which I hope it continues to do, they still don't understand what we're trying to do. They lack this insight, and it's really a problem for their success in the long run. So let me go back to the headlines I started with just to give a couple of examples. So you'll notice down here in the lower right, so this award for the tricorder prize, they got 35 companies went in and 10 got to the finals. They actually produced a product. They gave the award, last year. But notice, and it's subtle, but notice what the headline is. The Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize has its winner, but, notice the word but, not and, but work on tricorders will continue. You know what happened is they had no trouble getting a bunch of sensors into this thing and get physiologic parameters, heart rate, pulse ox, blood pressure, whatever. They had no clue how to turn that into information. It was just a bunch of data. Okay? The goal for this was that this thing was supposed to magically diagnose up to 10 diseases. No, couldn't do it. They couldn't figure out how to take data and turn it into information, probably for all the reasons that I mentioned. And on this one, and this is a tough part of the talk for me because I want to give credit to the researchers here because they're actually studying whether or not artificial intelligence matters. So I want to give them all the credit in the world. And by the way, they can't control the headlines. But I do want to point out that AI predicts heart attacks better than doctors wasn't really predicting heart attacks and had nothing to do with doctors. Otherwise, it was a highly accurate headline from NBC News. This is the actual study that it came from in PLOS One. Can machine learning improve cardiovascular risk prediction using routine clinical data? And what I want to point out is all they were doing was taking that ASCVD risk score, you know, like 6 variables. Okay, that's a parsimonious risk score. We would expect that if you added a bunch more variables to that, you might get a little better. And look at what the actual results were. Now, C-index or AUC is not the be-all and end-all. There are other ways to evaluate predictive models, but it is what they primarily reported. And I just want to point out that just that ASCVD risk score, the 6 variables, did pretty good at an AUC or a C-index of 0.723. And when they put in hundreds of other variables from machine learning from the EHR, it went all the way up to 0.764. Now, as researchers, clinicians, and all of your backgrounds, is that important? Is that a clinically important difference in prediction? And by the way, that has nothing to do with actually making a care decision. The other thing, and I found this pretty disappointing, including from the researchers, which is they also did plain old logistic regression. And they put more variables in logistic regression, and they did just as well as the machine learning. Okay, so this does not tell me that machine learning and AI is this magical thing. I'm glad they did the study, but the result, the conclusion here should not be that the machine learning significantly increases risk prediction, increasing the number of patients identified who benefit from preventive therapy while avoiding unnecessary treatment of others. To me, that's a conclusion way beyond. I'm glad they did the study, but it's way beyond the results of the actual study. And it just screams that we need to be doing meaningful research here, which asks the question, and then we are objective about where machine learning is or isn't going to be an advantage to us. And by the way, even where the prediction is better, then we need to put it in and show how it changes how we make care decisions integrated into care. We got a long way to go here. And I want to point out, this is starting to come out. There's starting to be backlash. We're starting to hear that venture capitals are starting to get cold feet about digital health in general and so forth. And we're seeing more things like this, which is going in the opposite direction of what we want. Eric Topol's Scripps Wired for Health study, randomized trial, had no clinical or economic benefit from digital health monitoring. Poor healthcare apps could cost money. Well, that's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be helping us save money, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, and I promise I'm getting past the challenges to the potential road forward, is if digital health is the future is not here yet. I think this is actually good news. So despite all the hype and all the stuff, we're actually at the beginning. We're in the introduction to the book. We're not even in chapter 1 or 2, which means we can have a role in this and guide it forward. I do believe this is true. My friend Ashish Atrija, who's the Chief Innovation Officer at Mount Sinai, likes to say that in the future, digital medicine will just be called medicine, okay? That there's no way we're not going to evolve and start to adopt technologies where it makes sense. But the question is, can we guide the evidence base to have it there? So with that in mind, that's what ACC is trying to do. Now, we're trying to do it not alone. In fact, ACC will just fail miserably if they try to do it themselves. This is an idea to facilitate and work collaboratively towards this. But we have tried to put our our name out there in collaboration with stakeholders across healthcare. And by the way, we wrote this. We had patients, consumer groups, payers, government, hospital and health systems, the tech industry itself, both startups and established companies, as well as ACC involved in this. And we did publish a few months ago in November a roadmap for innovation for how to pursue healthcare transformation in the era of digital health, big data, precision health. I'm glad it did actually get more attention than I thought it would in the tech world. Probably getting coverage in mobile health news is more important than getting coverage in most of the scientific journals that we read. And it did lead to an amazing amount of, ridiculous amount of incoming interest. I was glad to hear from tech companies, large and small, saying, well, are you really willing to partner and tell us what problems to solve and how to evaluate these? Because that's what they don't know how to do. And that's what we're trying to do. We're still at the beginning. This is probably too complex for the size of screen to where you guys are. Let me just point out a couple things. But I just want to point out, we laid out a roadmap of steps. We're embracing that this is not easy. But I do want to point out that we have a strong emphasis on what problems we're trying to solve, which is a good place to start, rather than the tech-forward thing. That we're trying to think about workflow integration. How does this integrate into clinical care, even as we evolve our care models? That we're willing to partner, or actually that if we don't partner, this is not going to work, and we are partnering with the tech world, which I'll come back to. That we need to develop a research and evaluations network, and I'm going to come back to this, but I'm increasingly thinking this is the key to this, that we have to figure out a way to evaluate these. And then, of course, there has to be the payment model alignment, and this isn't a policy talk, but I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Generically, what are we trying to do? And I know you've heard it a lot, but I keep trying to think of a better way to say it, which is, okay, right now we mostly deliver care. I like to say we deliver care cross-sectionally. All right, I either see my patients in the hospital or I see them in clinic, and then I say I'll see you in either 3, 6, 9, or 12 months. Those are, for some reason, the only choices I have. And then you come back and I see another cross-section and another cross-section. And of course, I'm missing, and this idea that when, although I love it from a social standpoint with my own patients, but when they come in and I say, hey, how you been? It's ridiculous. I have no idea what their actual health status is over time, and how can we measure that meaningfully in a way that matters. So I do think we're after this from our friends at Philips, but I couldn't find a better one. I do think we are conceptually after this idea of way more emphasis on when people are doing well, why do we keep bringing them back in and retesting them and changing things? That doesn't make any sense. That we obviously we'd like to have a focus, bless you, to the left on prevention. And then bolster digital tech on how we do diagnosis and treatment. So all of this is supported by monitoring, informatics, and connected care, which is the digital transformation. None of this is going to work without the payment model changes, and I'm not, again, not a health policy person, but there's a lot of questions about this. Well, it seemed like the kind of like CMS backed away from the bundles. We're still in fee-for-service, and so what are we doing? And I just wanted to say that as best I can tell just by surveillance and talking payers, government and everything, we're still skating that way. I still firmly believe, it's hard to know the exact timeline, that we're skating that way. Certainly Seema Verma has renewed the commitment to value-based models, and there's at least one or more cardiologists in the CMS payment group now who have made it pretty clear they're going to reinvigorate the bundles and go back at it. So I think we'll continue, and the private payers are skating this way. Even in the fee-for-service system, I don't know how many of you saw CMS announced new codes for reimbursement for remote monitoring for the first time. This does open the door that it could be a payment model for, in addition to chronic care monitoring. It's a different code. It's an additional code to get paid for remote monitoring of our patients. And then, of course, the big disruptions, which is you see things like CVS and Aetna coming together, and you've seen other big things where these large payers may not only be bringing in a payer to be with a health system delivery, they may actually invent their own delivery system and bypass the payment system altogether. That would be very disruptive, but it may open the door to, what do you think they're going to be interested in if they do that? They're going to be interested in the long-term health management of the patients, not bringing them back into clinic or bringing them back into the hospital. When they're doing well, leaving them alone and saying, great, you're doing great with your health. So it could be a game changer, and then that could shift the rest of the system to stay up. So what are we talking about with digital transformation? I'm going to go down a whole step here from the concept and then get back to research before ending my time. So Kamal Jethvani at Partners in Boston has put out, I think, a nice way of thinking about digital transformation in buckets. He calls them phases, and I took the word phases out because I don't think they're necessarily in series phases. I think they're all going in parallel, okay? There's 4 of them, but I think they require different levels of evidence, and I think they're going to happen at a different speed, and so that's why I like separating them. One is just digital tools, and digital tools, in my view, are just replacing something we already do now, like in the hospital, like during hospitalization, predicting risk and outcome, a new digital tool. I saw a nice study about a new smartphone app that through the camera does a better job of the Allen's test, you know, than we do, like Superior, just came out a randomized trial. Probably that's a digital tool we should adopt sooner than later, but it's in the hospital. Okay, this is in hospital or in clinic digital tools. The second phase of digital transformation of healthcare using technology will be virtual care. We're getting there. You're seeing a lot about telehealth, telemedicine. You're seeing some cost effectiveness studies that are finally positive in this regard. This is replacing what you do now to improve access, patient experience, and engagement. And we are seeing the payment models slowly but surely move that way. We still have some state line issues and other things to overcome. The things that get the most attention, though, rightfully so, I think, are remote monitoring. So this is data we didn't have before to inform care management. Mobile apps, biosensors, voice interactions, a big one, including health assessment just from hearing people speak over time, video, other things like this. This is, I think, a major area for digital transformation, one where we need intensive evaluation for evidence. And then the one that everybody talks about, it's hard to get away from the phrase AI or artificial intelligence, so-called AI-driven care. This is where you're using data science and evolving models of artificial intelligence to predict, interpret, potentially provide care recommendations, and even to the point of digital therapeutics, that is, where the AI itself is making the recommendation for what decisions to be made, including direct to patients. And this is where you get out on that crazy, like, uh-oh, how far is this going to go? I would point out, and we'll come back to in a minute, that this is the one that needs the most careful evidence evaluation. So if you look across to summarize the phases or stages or what it takes for digital transformation from digital tools, virtual care, remote monitoring, AI-driven care, you know, I'm just going to, and this is just an N of 1 opinion, I'm going to say that the left side of the screen is going to accelerate and go very fast. Why? Because when we have a digital tool, we already have a criterion to compare it to. Like the thing I said with the smartphone compared to the Allen's test. It's very straightforward for us to assess whether or not these digital tools, A, work and make us more efficient or are something we want to adopt in care. Plus, it's in our environment of the hospital or clinic. I think virtual care is more or less a slam dunk. You're telling me we're not going to have more virtual longitudinal care and interaction? It's not. The technology is pretty straightforward. Yes, we have to align the payment, but I think it's pretty straightforward. And we're seeing some really great clinics coming. Stanford has one. The congenital heart disease clinic that Ami Bhatt has developed out of at MGH, if anybody wants to be connected to her and how to set up a telehealth clinic, phenomenal. I think she's doing young early career cardiologist who I think she's done a phenomenal job. Where I think we need to put all of our effort and focus as clinicians, researchers, and the health system as far as requiring evidence, okay, is all on the right here, and remote monitoring and AI-driven care. I think this idea of just buying the hype is not going to work. It's a huge mistake, and I think it can actually harm patients. Because if you're going to use AI-driven care on genetic screening for markers that are not validated and then put defibrillators in them, we're hurting them, and then it's already happened. Okay, there are already case studies of this happening. This is where we need to weigh in if digital transformation is going to be successful. So, even in that AI-driven care, on the right side where I had the red, I do want to be clear that it's still a spectrum. I do think some things will come faster than others. And I think the thing that's going to come faster than we think is image interpretation. We are already seeing the big companies, Siemens, Philips, GE, whether you know it or not, they're in their new releases of their software, they are using machine learning and AI to increasingly improve the views and the interpretation of algorithms, okay? And I know from some of the publications that are coming out, I know these investigators, this is, publications lag where you are, and there are cardiologists in this AI space, in the imaging interpretation space, that are further along than we realize in interpreting images. And yes, I am talking about things like AI pre-reading echoes, and then we will just overread them. And who says how many this idea that we scan through and look at all the images and then think, I think that's going to go away sooner than we think. It's hard to say exactly how soon, but I think image interpretation is going to happen fast. It's the prediction and what we do with predictive models and AI, that's the real challenge. So earlier I picked on a study a little bit. I wasn't trying to pick on the investigators when I did the study, but how it was covered anyway. Let me give you a more recent one. January 2018, Google, University of California, San Francisco, Stanford, and University of Chicago. Love to see the academic and tech world collaboration. I want to point out that they did deep learning, which is just another way to say AI, machine learning. All right, the subtle differences. Electronic health records just from 2 hospitals. Okay, they found 216,000 patients. Want to guess how many data elements that translates into, the electronic health record? 2 hospitals, 216,000 patients. I can tell you I was off by a magnitude, and in fact I read it wrong the first time. Yeah, that would be 46 billion data points. I thought it was 46 million when I read the study, and then I realized there was a whole other comma. 3 things. 46 billion data points. It does show the power you can get from machine learning and AI approaches, that it can actually requires and handle that much data. And look at these risk prediction models, just real quick. We won't spend too much time on this. But they did it at different time points. Admission, 24 hours into admission, point of discharge. They were able to predict in-hospital mortality with an AUC of 0.93, 30-day readmission at the point of discharge, 0.75, prolonged length of stay, 24 hours in, and then even predicting what the primary discharge diagnosis would be, which the only comparative standard was about 50 to 60% accurate. They outperformed every existing model that we have for this stuff. Very impressive. But I still want to point out that we've had risk prediction from the beginning of medicine. How much do we use it, and how much does it change care decisions, okay? This is a new frontier of having powerful prediction, but we still have a long way to go to show it actually changes care, makes us more efficient, and improves outcomes. And one of the first people to weigh in on this on Twitter was Dr. Califf, who said about this study, nice advance in applying quantitative methods to EHR data, but be careful. Is medicine mesmerized by machine learning? That is, are we just so wowed by the predictive accuracy, but what do we do with it? And what he's referring here to is an article by a biostatistician who used to be at Duke, Franck Harold, many of you will know. I highly recommend for anybody vaguely interested in this thing, Franck Harold's statistical thinking blog, or just follow him on Twitter. Franck Harold's a leading biostatistician in this country, and he is not buying machine learning and AI in healthcare. Simply not buying it. He thinks it has fundamental flaws in the way it approaches data. Because what does machine learning and AI do? Machine learning and AI is basically very powerful and iterative, so it learns, but it's pattern recognition. It classifies people into groups and compares them. It's not prediction. And his point is, Franck Harold, is that classifiers are far from optimal in medical decision support. And he's really worried that this isn't going to inform us as well as we think it is. And I love this analogy he draws out a lot, which is a poker player wins because she's able to estimate the probability she will win with her current hand, not because she recalls how often she's had such a hand when she won in the past. And that's the difference between prediction and classification. So will he be right or not? I still think it's very powerful and impressive, but we have to prove how it's clinically useful. And then, of course, in Silicon Valley and the tech world, they think the EHR is truth, and that's all the data. It's absolutely true, and they're totally missing that it's only as good as the underlying data. That's why the imaging is going to go further faster, because the underlying data and imaging is good. high quality data, whereas all this risk prediction is still based on observational data with underlying data quality problems, inherent bias, and this correlation causation problem. So we have a ways to go, and it opens the door for research. This is I think I hope it's an evolution in thought, but I've been thinking more and more that as we look at digital health and health analytics and health technology in general, that the way that gets translated into the actual meaningful digital transformation of healthcare has got to be through health technology evidence generation. That we have to figure out how to do this, and it can't be this long cycle academic 7+ years, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. It's not going to work, but I do think we need evidence, and I think we have to figure out how to collaborate on this. And ACC is going to need to collaborate with academic research organizations like Duke and others who have started a little bit, and I'll show you that in a minute, to realize the gains of digital transformation. And I know this is my geeky scientific thing for the day, but it's like the Bernoulli equation here. What I'm going to say is, remember in the Bernoulli equation, as you go through that, the flow speeds up. And I think right now, all the technology on the left isn't getting into our care. It's just not working. And I think the way to speed up the digital transformation is we have to put together health technology evidence and how we're going to generate that. Another way to say it is that you may also like Amazon, Netflix, a new product or a new movie. It's just not good enough. That's not good enough for healthcare. The stakes are higher. We rightfully require evidence and, importantly, assessment of effects when it goes into care. Let me get to the end here with a couple of examples. So at ACC, I'm not just conceptualizing this, we're trying to do this, okay? I'm very open to additional partnerships, by the way. We are launching an Institute for Computational Health with Yale, with the Data Science Math Group, on machine learning and AI to ask actual seminal questions about where does AI machine learning actually gain us? Where can we apply it and gain information? And then how do we deploy that in care rather than just assuming the hype of AI? We have launched we've launched a company on remote monitoring and heart failure. So it's a tough area, but understand we're designing it together from co-creating from scratch, including the clinical enterprise, and using our own practices through the Pinnacle Registry to kick the tires and give feedback how we want to get this information back into the practice. And just more generically, we're trying to use the cardiovascular practices from across the country to work with all these startups or other organizations where we're actually partnering to either co-create for the very first time the digital health solutions. So in other words, not just taking them as a customer, but can we actually develop them and then test them for evidence in practice? And so far, so good, but we're right at the beginning of this. Even though we're now getting deeper and deeper into the tech world and all those logos, I would just want to say that the commitment is that we will never forget that no matter how fancy the digital health tech is, that the care delivery matters, okay? And I think that's the secret to this, is remembering that. We can remember the sphygmomanometer. Everybody remember that, right? So the sphygmomanometer was sort of personalized data in its day. So before that, we knew high blood pressure predicted stroke and death. We didn't have it. All of a sudden, we had a point of care tool with real data that told us if an individual patient had high blood pressure, we could treat it. But no matter how fancy the tech is and its digital and home monitors and trends, we still debate how low to treat people's blood pressure. We still debate which medications to use. And we still need to work with our patients on adherence and how to take those meds. It just reminds me that the tech and the data itself can enable healthcare transformation. It doesn't cause it, okay? And I think it's a fundamental thing missing in Silicon Valley. One last thing, concept I want to get across, because I'm increasingly thinking about this, is we need to combine artificial intelligence and clinical intelligence. And what we're not after is artificial intelligence to make decisions. I think it's simply not going to happen, this generalized AI thing. I think what we want is augmented intelligence, that it gives us information we can use that makes us better at what we do. And this isn't my concept. Bob Harrington, former DCRI director, now at Stanford, as you know, wrote this. I love this thing. They wrote this in January in JAMA with Abraham Verghese and Nigam Shah. What this computer needs is a physician. And talking about this idea of augmented intelligence to make us better and sort of getting this back on track, this digital transformation. At the end of the day, when my daughter, if she decides, she says she wants to be a doctor, we'll see. If she is, I do believe she will practice in a digitally transformed way. And I do believe that clinicians who use digital medicine and digital tools will be superior to clinicians without them, but only if we build the evidence base. And I'll end with one hopefully amusing anecdote about this idea of AI or tech replacing clinicians. I'm going to be on a panel at Stanford with Dr. Harrington and others, and they want it to be provocative. So I'm on with a leading AI data scientist from Stanford to plan this session. And the people organizing the conference said, what if we did the panel topic of, will AI replace cardiologists? And I was going to weigh in and say, that's fine with me, because you could probably tell I'd be fine telling you about this. But actually, before I could say a word, the data scientist jumped in and said very strongly, no, because it's a stupid question. It's never going to happen, all right? And this guy's right at the front of AI in healthcare. It's never going to happen, and it gets in the way of talking about how AI can help cardiologists. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. And just as I was processing that, he said under his breath, I'm not so sure about radiologists, though. Thank you for your time. Oh, good. Left time for questions. Anybody want to questions, thoughts? Anyone?
Thank you for the very interesting talk. My question is, like, if we are going so much towards technology in the future, or like not a very long future, but what do you think will change in how we train our medical students?
Yeah, boy, is that a good question. I don't think anybody's asked me that before. The short answer, and I'm guessing it's why you asked the question, is we better start changing how we train our medical students right now. I don't know if you've seen they have a lot of pros and cons, but in the national health system in the UK, they have fundamentally started doing this. They've recognized the rise of the medical entrepreneur, for example, that a lot of millennials, and what's behind millennials? Gen Z, thank you. Those are, I guess, would be my children. So, all right, yeah, that they're extremely interested in this stuff and, in fact, comfortable with it and promoting it, and that they want to be, yes, even if they want to go into healthcare and into medical school, but they also want to be entrepreneurial. They want to embrace tech. Even if they want to go into academics, they want a hybrid of academics and tech focus. Even in practice, they want to be at the front of tech. And they've started to put into their medical training courses on entrepreneurship, technology, some, if you want, informatics and computer science. Now, I don't know the degree, so does every medical student need all of that? I guess I could make a pretty strong argument that most medical schools in this country still in the first year of medical school teach biochemistry. And my question is that necessary in medical training? There's also a big move towards thinking about how do you get people who are going to do this augmented intelligence and the humanistic side of healthcare, right? We need to be more humanistic, EQ over IQ, this kind of stuff. There's also that move. But I think there's every reason to think that we should be teaching, informing the next generation about entrepreneurship, digital tech, and so forth, and including in research training. This shouldn't just be clinical training, because look at this open space. I hope it came across clear. Wide open space for us to get in here and say, here's how we should be evaluating technology, and almost no one leading in this space. It's pretty open. Thank you for that question. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, yeah, sure.
So what is that magical partnership between tech and healthcare like?
So I like that you use the word magical because it implies like things that don't exist, and so it's pretty new. I do want to say that there are a few places that have started to do it. Doesn't mean we're doing it right, but what we've started to do, okay, so I'll start with ACC because you should always be as critical eye on yourself, and then let me tell you about a couple other places real quick. We have started to form for the very first time actual partnerships, meaning we're not paying them and they're not paying us. If they're willing to partner and if they get this, they aren't just trying to sell us something. I just screen all those out. But if they actually get this and they're willing to co-create even from scratch, what problem are we trying to solve? How will we use? They're the technology and entrepreneurs, but we're the clinical enterprise, and we also have the practices and the care integration. If they're willing to partner, I'm willing to consider actual development of the tech solutions, try them in the clinics, and we're willing to go to market with the brand and revenue share and all that. So we're willing to actually, for the first time, co-create and go to market to do that. It's a new area. It is tech that we're working with. I'm sorry, it is the industry. It's a different kind of industry, mostly startups. But if we're not going to solve this, I don't know what else we're going to do. So we're actually trying to build the digital health tools. I mentioned the one company we started, but that's just one where we launched it. We have 10 other active partnerships going in various parts, AI, digital health, across different conditions. A lot of these are going to fail, right? Because this is innovation and there'll be a high fail rate. This has been a huge shift for the ACC board. Several other professional societies have asked me to come talk to their boards about what the ACC is doing, and I will tell you, they're very well-known medical associations with acronyms you would recognize. Every single one of them has told me, no way. We don't have the risk. Our board just can't do this. So we're definitely out on a limb, so we may fail spectacularly, but I hope we'll do it with style. But I'm emboldened by the shifts I'm seeing in academic research. Academics and research are kind of bad words in Silicon Valley because they think they're going to get caught up in some grant process or whatever. But all of a sudden, this is shifting, and shifting fast. So Scripps, I'm just going to give a few examples. Scripps in San Diego, all of a sudden, they have a Qualcomm-funded fellow to learn entrepreneurship and tech evaluation, and they have multiple junior faculty in cardiology who are studying digital health for the first time. And they're looking for national mentorship and stuff, but they're starting to create an academic bridge. You definitely see this at UCSF. A lot of these are in California. UCSF. Okay, the system itself has been ignoring, the cardiology group has built a very nice digital health platform for evaluation of digital health tools. They've run multiple studies. And for the first time, the health system is saying, well, wait a minute, maybe we could actually evaluate the digital health tool and it will help us figure out which ones we should actually put into the system. Wow, what an idea. Actually marrying the research enterprise with the system. Stanford has launched its Center for Digital Health thanks to Bob Harrington. It's still young. But you've probably seen they're working directly with Apple on the Apple Heart Study and how to figure out detection of AFib. And that's being driven by the researchers and clinicians at Stanford advising Apple. I think that's pretty interesting. And then, so those are the examples back there. WashU is starting to try to figure out this on the direction of Tom Maddox. And then I'm hoping that Duke is doing this in meetings yesterday, including with Adrienne and others, hearing what's happening with the commitment of the health system for the first time and the potential learning health system to do just this. I know it's new and nascent and barely being announced here, but I'm hopeful that this is maybe the next place that steps into this fray, including potentially training of DCRI research fellows and so forth. And if ACC can help support that and facilitate and get national mentorship for these people, we're there. Okay, that's too long of an answer for your question.
All right, well, you talk about how digital technology can add value in health, and of course our payment programs, we want to encourage value in the delivery system. And I know you're not the policy guy, but if you have thoughts about whether accountable care organizations are an appropriate model to encourage this type of innovation, or what role can payers play?
So I think the payers have been a obvious barrier, because the fact is they talk about innovation and ACO models and alternative payment models, but they mostly are still sitting there with actuarial tables and estimating. They really aren't committing yet to innovative payment models, which would say, all right, fine, so for your heart failure patients, we'll go at risk. And first of all, we're not very good at the at-risk part either, which is the second thing. So it's us and them. But we haven't come together to say, so all right, so take care of your population of heart failure patients. We'll pay you this much. It would suddenly be in our effort. It would suddenly be directly in our best benefit and greatly the best benefit of our patients that if they're home and healthy and doing well, we leave them alone. Why do we keep reminding them they're sick and bring them in and do stuff? I don't know, because right now the payment model isn't set up. So if we could get to that, that's great. The payers, I think, are behind on that, to your point. I will say, and this isn't meant to be too glass half full because I think it's going way too slow, The most common new position being created at private payers in the United States right now is Innovation Payment Model, or Chief of Innovation Payment Models. Blue Shield of California has one. He's married to a cardiologist at Stanford. And he is actually talking about this stuff. He's admitting it's hard to get the Blues and others to buy off on this, but at least they are appointing people to think about doing this. I told you I think there's some movement in CMS back towards the bundles and back towards alternative payment models. So it's like kind of this slow, painful steps, but they all are going in the same direction. And what I don't know, and maybe you have an opinion on it, is what if somebody actually bites and does this and shows it works? So maybe the Blue Shield of California, Ed Jun is his name. If Ed puts together a payment model that could do that and gets practices to buy off on that, can it work? I think a lot of the reason the hospitals' health systems, which you know are all getting bigger and bigger and going together, I think the reason they haven't pushed the payers harder on doing this is because we're not sure how to estimate at risk. So we're really good at risk in the hospital. We're really not good at the law. And which of these digital tools do you trust to monitor the patients at home and know they're doing okay? So we're going to have a skate on the digital technology with some evidence, the payers being willing, and then our health system saying, okay, we're ready to go at risk. And that's the only thing. I just don't know when that happens. But I think I hope you think it's a realistic assessment of the situation as of today. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but when?
So with the digital tools that are currently available, what are your recommendations for practicing clinicians of what they should incorporate into their practice and how to balance what's available versus what's reimbursable?
Yeah. Well, okay, those are two important questions. Okay, you know there's no magical answer to this, right? So I'll use a story. My wife is a hospital administrator, ER doc by background, CMO, now COO of a hospital. So you might imagine she keeps asking me, because she runs a cardiovascular service line, and for her system too. They keep asking, all right, so we keep getting pitched, a lot of these startups and stuff. We do this amazing artificial intelligence. We do this amazing digital health thing. I will tell you, for the most part, I'm just telling her to ignore them, okay? Because I don't think they have any evidence, and I don't think they can deliver. You're just adding to the costs of care. I will tell you that the system nonetheless gets wowed by some of these technologies and buys them, and then tells the individual hospitals in the system or the clinicians, here, use this AI tool, and all of those have failed in her system. And Harlan told me Yale just did this, and the same thing, it failed. Shocking, right? That the system administrators buy something that's not been proven, and then it doesn't work. So I actually am preaching, I know it sounds crazy with all the hype and the stuff, but I'm sort of preaching patience and saying, I don't know, because none of them have any evidence to tell me which ones actually work, so why don't we go build the evidence? They can't wait forever. I would say the answer to that is that a few places, and this was to an earlier, I lost the thought in an earlier reply, so I'm glad it came back in my head, which is I would pay close attention to health systems that also have their own payment model. Geisinger, UPMC, two examples, right? Geisinger and UPMC already have those incentives aligned that if they could figure out which of these digital tools work, and look what's happening in their innovation section. The UPMC innovation, Rasu, I can't remember his last name, Rasu Sritha runs it. It was a small little innovation thing 5 years ago. He has 150 people. You know why? Because UPMC is actually looking to them to do exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, fine. Either from scratch build a digital solution, what problem we're trying to solve working with the tech companies, or take the rapid cycle, let's test them in our system, and if they work, we'll take them, because we do care about the home monitoring because we have the aligned incentives. So I'd look for the I'd say the system leaders so far in this are the Geisingers and UPMC. Some people will say Kaiser. I think it's been more of a mixed bag in Kaiser so far, but those three. And then otherwise, wait, and let's get the evidence out there. All right, well, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.